Everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in this video, we'll be updating our ultimate class guide for the Elder Scrolls Online in 2025. As is usually the case every year, each class has changed a bit for balancing, so your favorite classes might actually play a little bit differently than they have in the past, but we'll cover them all in this video. So whether you're new to the Elder Scrolls Online and want to know which class is best for you, or if you're a returning player looking to get back into the game, this is going to be the perfect guide to help you get started in ESO. Timestamps, as always, are provided below if you want to jump to a specific class or rewatch a section, and I'll have some links in the description for class guides and builds if you want to learn more. But that said, let's jump right into things. Let's start this off with the class that everybody probably is wondering about the most, and that is the Arcanist, ESO's 7th and newest class, which released in the Necrom chapter in 2023. What you need to know right up front is that the Arcanist feels and plays very differently from every other class in the game. So for most people, that difference might be exactly what they're looking for to mix things up, while for others, it might rub them the wrong way instead. The theme of the Arcanist class centers around the Daedric Prince Hermaeus Mora, Lord of Fate and Forbidden Knowledge, and its skills incorporate Mora's own black books, runes of power, and otherworldly tentacles and other forms. So the Arcanist, with its neon green ground effects and laser beams, creates this really interesting visual presence in the game, and it makes it stand out from every other class by far. In terms of those class abilities, remember that the Arcanist was designed to stand out from the pack, so it does feel and play pretty unique and pretty different than everything else we have access to in the game currently. For example, the Arcanist's main source of damage is a unique AoE channeled beam attack called Fate Carver, which lasts around 5 seconds and has to be aimed. So while this may sound simple, there's actually a lot of planning involved to optimize your damage. Using Fate Carver, you can cast other skills to build up a combo point system called Crux, which if you have 3 total Crux already stacked, that's going to increase the damage of your Fate Carver beam significantly and even add in some more bonus effects. Timing is really important too, as you'll need to make sure your buffs and debuffs have at least 5 seconds of duration left before casting that Fate Carver channel, or they'll run out mid-beam, leaving you more vulnerable to attack. Having such a strong damage ability like Fate Carver built into a long-duration AoE skill also makes the Arcanist extremely powerful for beginners and easy for current players looking for a build with a simple rotation. We know that the Arcanist was designed both to be easy to pick up, but also have a high level of mastery. You can compare it kind of like to Oaken Soul heavy attack build if you're familiar with that. Just instead of holding down your heavy attack button to deal damage on the Arcanist, you build up your Crux and then let your beam do the work. Now, Arcanists, as you'd expect, also have 3 powerful skill lines, with each one dedicated to a role of combat, either DPS, tanking, or healing. Under Herald of the Tome, we already mentioned the ultra-powerful Fate Carver beam. You're going to be using that most often, but you also have Abyssal Impact that roots enemies in place and debuffs them while also healing you or increasing your damage based on the morph that you pick. And the class damage buff here is fantastic for increasing damage passively or providing some extra sustain to your build. The Arcanist tank skill line, called Soldier of Apocrypha, has the only class-based taunt in ESO currently, opening up some new and unique possibilities for tank builds that are centered on something other than using a sword and shield or a frost staff as your primary weapon, meaning that you could taunt while dual wielding or using a two-hander, for example. The skill also has a big damage shield in the Impervious Rune Ward skill, and you have even more powerful defensive rune skills which can debuff the enemy with things like Minor Brittle and Minor Vulnerability, forcing them to take more damage from you and your group. So the Arcanist has a ton of utility, both for soloists and for group play. And finally, in the healing skill line called Curative Rune Forms, Arcanist can make use of another powerful beam ability, kind of like Fate Carver, but this time for aimed healing over time. It's called Remedy Cascade. The Arcanist is also a master of shields, so skills like Chakram of Destiny can provide a strong damage shield to you and your group. Plus, Arcanist Domain offers many powerful buffs, like Minor Courage, to allies in the area. Now, Arcanist's ultimate skills are also very powerful, with my favorite one being the Unblinking Eye and its morphs for intense AoE damage. You can think of these as like a Destruction Staff ultimate, just more tightly focused. And then there's the Gibbering Shield skill and its morphs, which create a very powerful defensive shield, kind of like the Barrier ultimate on steroids. And then there's the Vitalizing Glyphic ultimate, which is going to be giving you some powerful healing for your allies, plus a unique buff to weapon and spell damage, making it a great option for more coordinated group play. So when you look at everything the Arcanist class has to offer, it's definitely one of the most balanced classes in the game, I feel. For solo content, the Arcanist is easily one of your best options, especially if you are a newer player. But that's because its powerful damage skills, defensive tools, and self-buffs make it very easy to survive in a variety of content. And for more experienced or endgame players, if you're looking for a powerful group build, the Arcanist may not surpass what other classes can do necessarily, whether it comes to being like a meta tank or a healer or DPS build, but it is extremely strong and it offers that unique gameplay experience using Crux and the different new skills that you have access to that really make the game feel fresh again, which definitely makes the class worth playing, in my opinion. Next, let's talk about the Necromancer, ESO's Masters of Death. Now, if you're set on mastering the dark arts in ESO, you'll discover that playing a Necromancer can be a bit more challenging than some of the other classes in the game. One big reason for this is that necromancy is still frowned upon in most major cities, and if a guard sees you raising up a corpse, even just for a second, they will immediately hunt you down and try to kill you. Don't worry, you can run away and your bounty or your threat level will slowly go back down to where you can enter town again, but you want to be careful about which spells you cast and where. Basically, anything that involves summoning skeletons or spirits is a no-go within the city limits. But Necromancer abilities can also be slightly more challenging to use than those of other classes because some skills require corpses to be on the ground in order to use that skill, and some skills are even empowered by having corpses on the ground as well. And this creates opportunities for a unique and more skilled gameplay if you can manage all the mechanics of using corpses effectively on the battlefield. Now, just like the Arcanist class, Necromancers also have a wide range of abilities that can fulfill any role in the game, including tanking, healing, and DPS. And also, just like the Arcanist, each of the class's 3 unique skill lines is focused specifically on one of those traditional MMO roles. The Gravelord skill line, for example, is focused primarily on DPS, and like any good Necromancer would, that's by summoning undead minions like skeletal mages and archers to do damage for you, while the Exploding Blastbone skill detonates for massive AoE damage or to further empower your own abilities. Now, the Bone Tyrant skill line is focused primarily on damage absorption, aka tanking, allowing you to cast some unique protective spells like Beckoning Armor, which reduces your incoming damage, but also pulls enemies in closer to you to make them easier to control. And then the Necrotic Potency skill, which leeches the life out of nearby corpses and gives you a ton of ultimate back in return, which is fantastic for soloing and for groups. This skill line has also been updated recently to add more damaging options like Skeletal Embrace, which summons skeletal claws from the ground that deal AoE ice damage, among other effects. Now finally, the Living Death skill line focuses on the Necromancer's healing abilities, so skills here like Render Flesh allow you to heal yourself and your allies at the expense of health regeneration, while Restoring Tether can turn any corpse on the ground into a heal over time effect for you and your entire group. And the powerful Spirit Guardian skill summons a ghostly ally to follow you, while also healing you over time and absorbing some damage that you take. Now, Necromancers actually have some of the strongest class ultimates in the game, which we need to discuss as well. This definitely makes them one of the most powerful classes in ESO, both for soloing and for groups in PvP or PvE, whatever you want to do. You can, for example, summon a massive Big Daddy Colossus, dealing tons of damage, debuffing and stunning enemies. You could also resurrect multiple players at the same time, or you might even transform into different form entirely called the Bone Goliath, which is pretty amazing as well. So if you're interested in a summoner style build that has access to plenty of heals and damage over time, then definitely check out the Necromancer class. Next up, we have the Warden class, a defender of nature that can summon animal companions as well as cast frost spells that debuff the enemy or empower themselves or the group. The Warden's strong healing and burst damage potential make it a great class if you're interested in PvP or even a bit of solo PvE. And much like the Necromancer and Arcanist that we already talked about, the Warden has one class skill line for each of the traditional MMO playstyles of DPS, healing, and tanking, making it a pretty well-balanced class that can fit pretty much any role in ESO. First, the Animal Companions skill line allows the Warden to summon Cliff Racers, Shulks, and Fetcher Flies to damage their opponents with direct damage, timed burst, and damage over time. Many of these summoned creatures also provide secondary debuffs, like reducing your enemy's armor and making them take more damage from your attacks, which is excellent. Winter's Embrace is the Warden's tanking skill line, which is focused on those frost effects I mentioned. The Warden class has access to a great armor buff in this skill line with the Ice Fortress ability, as well as an area immobilize and damage over time with Winter's Revenge, and a heal skill that also has the potential to stun enemies in Arctic Blast. And finally, the Green Balance skill line focuses primarily on healing, both the Warden and their group by summoning healing vines, flowers, and trees. Healing skills like Green Lotus and Living Trellis are really useful as they heal you automatically when you deal damage or when you take damage yourself. The Warden's ultimate skills are a bit lacking in terms of raw power, but they do make up for it in terms of their utility. A Permafrost, for example, is incredibly powerful in PvP, both for snaring your enemies and also for defending your group with major protection. That's an extra armor buff. Then there's the Bear Pet Ultimate. This is an awesome passive DPS skill that does damage for free, with some bonus execute damage thrown in when casting. And then there's the Healing Thicket Ultimate, which provides amazing focused healing in a specific area when your survival is key. Now, all in all, the Warden is one of the most fun and flexible classes in ESO, and it's recommended for new and experienced players looking to fill in any role or any playstyle in the game. And if you're interested in crafting a nature-themed build that commands animals and plants, or even the classic Ice Mage, then the Warden is definitely the best class to start with. Next up, we have the Nightblade class, one of ESO's most popular classes at launch thanks to its thematic characteristics of being a stealthy rogue, or basically an assassin. Along those lines, Nightblades specialize in direct damage and escape tools like invisibility and teleportation, though they also have many unique skills which let them do just as well as tanks and even healers in group content. In terms of solo gameplay, the Nightblade's ability to cloak with invisibility as well as teleport across the battlefield to avoid combat situations makes it a top class for surviving and surprising your enemies in PvP, though there have been some recent changes when it comes to their cloak ability, which we'll dive into in just a minute. Generally speaking, though, the Nightblade class does have one skill line per role of tanking, healing, and damage, as we saw with the other classes on this list, though there's a bit of overlap here too. This is because the skill lines for Nightblades have a greater focus on theme rather than playstyle. For example, the Assassination skill line, just like it sounds, is focused on damaging your target. In this skill line, you'll find an offensive teleport skill called Ambush, which allows for great mobility, especially in PvP. You also have the skill Merciless Resolve, which allows you to build up stacks or charges, which can be conserved for increased damage or unleashed at 5 stacks for a big burst attack and a heal. The skill Impale also does bonus damage to your enemy once they reach low health, and your main single target DPS skill, Veiled Strike, is now located in this skill line as well, so almost all of your damaging skills can be found here. Now, Nightblades also have the Shadow skill line, which includes different utility-focused skills as some help for aspiring tanks. Here we have the Shadowy Disguise skill line, which I mentioned earlier, which can turn your character invisible for a few seconds, but this recently changed to now be a toggle on or off ability, meaning it stays on as long as you have enough magicka to maintain it, but at the same time you can no longer regenerate your magicka while invisible, so there is a bit of a trade-off there. If you prefer not to use that morph, there is a healing morph as well, which is going to be a little bit more useful for tanks. Now, Nightblades also have the Shadow Image skill, which lets you teleport away from your enemy for even more mobility. And while the Nightblade does not have a defensive armor skill, they actually get the same armor buff that all other classes get passively when casting any Shadow ability. It's easy to proc this defensive passive with skills like Twisting or Refreshing Path to increase your damage or your healing respectively. And finally, Nightblades have the Siphoning skill line focused on blood magic or healing. For example, in this skill line, you have the powerful Swallow Soul ability, which damages your enemy and gives a percentage back as a heal. This skill is going to be great for all types of content, but especially when playing solo. In the skill line, you also have Healthy Offering, powerful burst heal that actually costs some of your own health to cast, but it's very good for group content. Now, in terms of ultimates, Nightblades have an interesting set of ultimate abilities in these skill lines, including one ultimate for direct damage, one ultimate for group defense, and one ultimate for group healing and crowd control. The most powerful is most definitely the ultimate Incapacitating Strike or Soul Harvest. Both morphs are very good options, as one of these potentially stuns and does big bonus damage, while the other reduces enemy healing and restores ultimate. So if you're looking for a class with high burst damage and the potential to surprise enemies, or looking to support your group in unique and engaging ways, then you'll definitely want to check out the Nightblade class. But next up we have the Dragonknight class, ESO's version of an in-your-face melee brawler with a theme centered around, you guessed it, fighting like a dragon. Whether you're applying deadly poison or flame attacks to your enemies, throwing boulders, or flying through the air with dragon's wings, the DK utilizes a visceral combat style that's both effective and fun to play. Like most of the 4 base game classes, the Dragonknight skills are mixed between all 3 skill lines with less focus on specific group roles and a greater focus on themes. Ardent Flame, for example, focuses on harnessing the power of fire or sometimes poison to deal damage, debuff enemies, or even heal yourself or allies. The ability Burning Embers, for example, which you unlock first in this skill line, is one of the strongest single target damage over time skills in the game, dealing massive damage to one target while also healing you at the same time. And Noxious Breath is a poison effect that's extremely useful, as it also debuffs enemy armor, helping you and your group deal more damage. The Draconic Power skill line does just what it says, and that's unlocking some amazing and unique dragon-themed abilities. In this skill line, you have Spiked Armor to increase your defense, Burning Talons to immobilize and debuff your enemy, and Dragonfire Scales to help absorb damage. The passives in the skill line also make the Dragonknight ridiculously tanky, making this class an optimal choice for a pure tank build. And finally, the Earthen Heart skill line offers a strong combination of tank, healer, and damage dealing skills. Stone Giant, for example, is a unique damage ability that can be used at range and even debuffs the enemy, causing them to take more damage from the group. Igneous Shield can also give you and your allies a group damage shield, and Petrify can both stun and immobilize enemies at the same time, making it a very powerful skill in PvP. Dragonknight ultimates, though, are some of the strongest in the game, including Standard of Might, which damages enemies in an area while also increasing your own damage, while Magma Shell is the ultimate tanking option, reducing your total damage received. And of course, we have Ferocious Leap, an extremely impressive and deadly ultimate, which adds dragon wings to your character, allowing you to leap through the air from range and eventually come down with a huge burst of AoE damage that also knocks enemies up into the air and stuns them. Ultimates don't get much more fun than the DK Dunk. So if you like playing in the thick of things and want to punish your enemies with powerful dots and AoE attacks, or fight hard to protect your group as an unstoppable tank, then the Dragonknight is the perfect class for you. Coming up next, we have the Templar class, and the theme of the Templar centers around bringing the power of the sun to the battlefield, whether that's for offense or defense. Templars also excel at both self-healing and group healing and remain one of the strongest classes in the game since launch due to their strong healing potential. In PvE groups, Templar healers will often be highly desirable for their strong burst healing and their ability to restore resources to the group, while PvP Templars still remain one of the most difficult classes to defeat due to their strong defensive buffs, constant self-healing, and their ability to cleanse enemy negative effects for themselves and for their groups. Now, in terms of skill lines, Templars do have a blend of abilities throughout all 3 of their class skill lines, with one of these specifically devoted to healing and defense. But in their first skill line, Adric's Spear, you'll find most of their offensive abilities, including Puncturing Sweep, a channeled spear attack that does multiple hits in one action while also healing you and snaring your enemies. Templars also have the Blazing Spear skill, which launches a spear high into the ground to rain down area of effect damage and restore your team's resources through a group synergy. In the Dawn's Wrath skill line, the Vampire's Bane skill is one of the longest lasting damage over time skills in the game, making for an easier rotation. And Templars can also make use of an amazing passive healing skill called Living Dark, which heals you back every time you take damage. And the Radiant Oppression skill here is probably the best execute skill in the game, both for PvE and PvP, offering massive damage the lower your enemy's health pool gets. Finally, Templars do have access to a very strong healing skill line, which I mentioned. This is called Restoring Light. This has made them one of the best healing specs in ESO since launch. In this skill line, we have arguably the best direct heal in the game called Breath of Life, which can provide an instant and massive burst heal for yourself or another group member. Templars also have numerous group heals and buffs in this skill line, which place effects on the ground surrounding you and your team, essentially making you stronger for standing in them, such as Extended Ritual and Restoring Focus. Not only that, Templars have powerful ultimates as well. Their Sweep ultimate, for example, can do massive burst damage up front with your spear, making it very strong, especially in PvP. Remembrance channels a massive group heal while making you as the caster nearly invulnerable for the duration, and Solar Prison does an AoE debuff on your enemies, while also potentially giving your team a Gravity Crush synergy, which can explode for a huge damage spike in both PvP and PvE. All of this accounts for Templars being an extremely powerful class in ESO with a strong class identity. If you want to play something similar to a knight or a paladin, a cleric or a healer, then Templar is the class for you. Their consistent healing and strong defenses also make them a very good class for any beginner getting into ESO for the first time. Last but not least, we have the Sorcerer class. Sorcerers represent the classic caster archetype, but with a unique Elder Scrolls twist. Sorcerers in ESO are connected with elemental damage, specifically lightning damage skills, but also have access to some darker magic types, including Daedric summoning, basically calling on creatures from other planes of existence. And just like any class in ESO, there are even some stamina-based variants of these skills, meaning if you want to be a Sorcerer tank using a sword and shield, or a Sorcerer damage dealer that uses a two-handed sword, well, you can do that too. Now, the Sorcerer's Dark Magic skill line offers a lot to the class in terms of damage and utility. For example, the Crystal Fragments morph can do big bursts of damage, or you can choose the Crystal Weapon morph, which causes your light and heavy attacks to do bonus damage and reduce enemy armor. Then there's a skill called Dark Deal, one of the best sustained skills and buffs in the game, restoring resources and granting you Minor Berserk and Minor Force for even more damage. The Stormcalling skill line utilizes that elemental magic that we talked about earlier. Skills like Mage's Wrath and Lightning Flood do strong lightning damage, either as an execute or an AoE dot, respectively. And Boundless Storm lets you morph into lightning itself with bonus movement speed and armor. And there's also a Hurricane form of this skill for stamina sorcerers. And finally, Critical Surge is one of the best passive heals in the game, especially for solo builds, healing you back when you deal critical damage to a target. The Daedric Summoning skill line focuses on those Daedric objects or creatures in order to empower your gameplay. In this skill line, sorcerers can summon Daedric Scamps, Twilights, and Clan Fears to act as pets to deal damage or to heal themselves or their group. And they can also summon Daedric armor and weapons, including the unique bound armaments for stamina sorcerers, which can summon up to 4 spectral daggers to burst down an enemy. Sorcerers also have one of the strongest damage shields in the game from the skill line, called Hardened Ward. Now, sorcerers do have some pretty impressive ultimate abilities as well. The Greater Storm Atronach, for example, is in the Daedric Summoning skill line, and it looks amazing and also does pretty solid damage, while also buffing the damage of your group through a powerful synergy. Then there's the Suppression Field Ultimate, which is a pivotal PvP skill as it can negate other ultimate effects and magic abilities from the opposing team. And then there is Overload, a bit of a niche ultimate as it increases the damage done by your light or heavy attacks. Definitely good in some situations, though you might not use it all that often. But all in all, sorcerers can be one of the best solo or group classes in the game, depending on which playstyle you prefer. Their access to strong damage shields and summon creatures makes them particularly powerful for beginners and soloists, while their defensive capabilities and built-in speed also make them a force to be reckoned with in PvP. So if you want a class that improves with you as your own skill level and experience in the game improves, then definitely check out the Sorcerer class. And there you have it, everybody, the 7 classes of the Elder Scrolls Online, broken down by theme and abilities. Which class do you like the best, and which one do you think best fits your own playstyle? Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Remember, you can find builds and guides for all the classes here linked down below, or just head over to our website, that's hacktheminotaur.com, and I'll see you around in the next video. Hey everybody, if you're struggling at all with the Elder Scrolls Online, I definitely know the feeling. I struggled myself with this game for months. And the biggest problem I had was that even though ESO says you can play any way you want, it never really teaches you how. Like what skill lines to focus on, which passives are best, or which one of the 400 plus gear sets in the game are worth getting. Now, like I said, it actually took me months of teaching myself how the game works and hundreds of hours of experimenting before I could actually start to make builds that were effective and fun to play. But that's why I finally put my system for creating builds into a simple step-by-step guide that you can now use to create your own fun and powerful builds yourself. We're calling this the ESO Zero to Hero Academy, and it's being hosted through Podia, which is an amazing online learning platform. So far, our ultimate build guide has over 25 lessons and over 2 hours of content designed to take you from a beginner to a master build crafter, not in months like it took me, but in just a few hours. So if you want to check out the guide and preview all of the included lessons, just check out the link below to get started. As always, thanks again for watching, and I will see you around in the next video.